All right. So, well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right. So, one question we've been asking just everyone as first question out of the gate is, what is your earliest memory of beauty?
You want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first.
Make sure to,
You love
yeah.
So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, surrounded by, big tall trees, and spent a lot of time outdoors as a little kid. And I don't have a specific memory, but I would say some of the moments that I loved the most was planting gardens with my family, looking at new flowers with my grandma. My grandma had beautiful gardens, and like those first new sprouts. You'd put a seed in the ground, you'd be like, oh, 10 days later, finally something pops up, and that was just kind of magical to me.
Yeah, similarly, I think it's a family memory. On my mom's side, there are a lot of artists, sort of Midwest amateur artists, which I guess is a category of artists. And my mom's uncle Carl was a farmer, but also a painter. And I think he developed a love for painting after World War II, and he came back to the farm, and he took up a brush, and his barn, the side of his barn was a massive mural that he had painted. Inside of his house were all sorts of like bits of wood that he had painted scenes on, and all of us kids in our family have sort of grabbed, taken a painting or two from his collection and have it in our home, and so we grew up with kind of very passionate amateur arts in our family. My grandmother on my mom's side was always crafting something, whether it was embroidery or ceramics or painting and whatnot, and my mom's incredibly creative when it comes to gardening in particular. And I just have such really clear memories of my mom really lovingly tending to the garden when I was a kid and really thoughtfully planting flowers. And so she may not have been an artist with a paintbrush or with a sculptor's chisel, but she certainly was an artist with a trowel and spade.
I was going to say, like,
Hi, Mom.
you're watching today?
Yeah, she's
watching.
watching.
Oh,
She always
awesome.
watches.
Oh, hey, Mom. That's been so interesting, I think, over the course of the summer. I think, like, literally every single week, someone has talked about, like, their mom or their grandfather or someone, and, like, a really clear memory, even for, like, someone who was, I think they were 3, and just had this really clear memory of experiencing beauty and just the role of family and all of that. So that's very, very sweet. So from your experiences of beauty, how did you come into pottery?
Well, I would say I was kind of exposed to ceramics when I was young. My mom was a ceramicist. She took it up when I was, I don't know, 2 or 3, and learned from a local lady named Fern. And I would remember, Mom would do the mold ceramics where you pour in the slip and wait for, half hour, and then you'd unmold it. And so I would help clean the edges where the 2 pieces of the mold came together. And she would let me make like little vases and stuff. And when she would sell at kind of Christmas shows or art shows around town, I would make a little bed for myself under the table. And so whenever I got tired, I'd have my little naps under the table. So, and yeah, I still take naps. So, but, and then in high school, I was able to take a ceramics course. And that, I'm very hands-on. I love to, make things, and so those were my favorite classes: the pottery and the sewing and the cooking and things like that. So, and then in college, I officially started taking, classes and just loved it. I loved getting messy. As a kid, I would make mud pies, and that was where I was happiest, was in my playhouse with making mud pies, and so, yeah.
I remember really clearly my mom when we moved to the West Coast from the Midwest, visited a pottery on Bainbridge Island, Washington, which was near where we lived, and she bought this kind of factory second, as it were, pitcher that she really, really loved, and I have a picture of it here. actually. So this is the picture that started it all for me, and and I remember her describing it as this particular potter liked the shape of the handles, because because of a certain resemblance to an anatomical part of a woman, and as a 11-year-old, I think I found that really fascinating, and so that got me into pottery. But then Julia mentioned that we were in college together, and we actually that's
Wait,
us.
is that you guys?
Yeah, I
Oh
used to have
my
hair,
gosh.
and so when we spent 2 years studying ceramics in college together, and had a little side hustle for a while. So yeah, that's
I
us.
cannot believe
I know.
that's you. Oh my God.
I know.
Oh my gosh. You guys are so adorable. Oh my goodness, I love it. Oh. D- I'm curious, for those of us who are not potters, can you explain to us, like, is there a little,
Yeah. So,
how that works?
so first of all, I'm like a really terrible potter, and I'm definitely the more like the grunt worker in the studio. Like, I'm really good at recycling clay, and Julia's the one with the talent. But we do have a little studio here in Chelsea. That's part of our studio, and this is Julia and her sister throwing. But the cycle, what I love about pottery is that, to me, it is kind of like a story of salvation and God's work in our lives. And it really starts with basically taking something. Pottery is just like a lump of clay, right? And when you're throwing things and they don't work out, you can just crumble them up and then add water to it and recycle it, and it just starts again. And it's sort of an unending cycle. And that's why the notion of beauty and imperfection is so important to me, because it doesn't require a level of perfection, which is great, because I was always the kid that could never color in the lines. And I was always the kid that got yelled at because my penmanship was so terrible, and so I never was able to find a kind of creative outlet as a kid, and pottery kind of became that for me, in part because it's so forgiving, and so yeah, pottery sort of starts with, in some ways, the failures of the previous day, and then you end up with little balls of clay that you throw on a wheel, and you center it on the wheel, and there's it's an experience that you can't really teach with words, which is really, I'm a theologian, and I guess I do deal with a lot of mystery, but I use a lot of words to describe the mystery, and there's something about learning how to throw on the wheel that you can't teach somebody unless they learn the feeling of it. So you're teaching people how to kind of find their bodies in a space, and then with time and practice, something beautiful can emerge from it. And then it goes through this really amazing process of transformation where, a raw pot on the wheel then gets trimmed and dried and then fired to 2,000 degrees and then glazed and then fired again. And it turns from this just ground up mountains. That's what clay is. It's just ground up mountains. And it's fired and turned into something completely different. And it's just transformed. And you don't really know what the transformation is going to look like in the middle of it, because these are a couple things that Julia made, and on the left-hand side are the what it looks like when you apply the glaze, and on the right-hand side is what it looks like after it's fired. Wow. And so the transformation that's really kind of in some ways up to the kiln, and again opens up to a kind of imperfection and beauty within imperfection. Not that there's anything imperfect about this.
Well, I just feel like that so sets up my third question, which is, how has this practice of creating ceramics and pottery sort of impacted or formed your relationship or experience with God, and then maybe like vice versa too? Like, how has your experience with God sort of also impacted and formed your practice?
Well, I would say I put, all of my attention into each pot, and there's that, that focus, wanting to make it, just right. And, in Isaiah, it talks about God being the potter and we are the clay. And I think about how, each piece is precious to me. I have a hard time crushing my pieces. because I know the time and the love that went into each one. And so I'm like, oh, I think this could be something, right? It's not perfect, but it could be something. It has a job. And yeah, so I feel like, let's see, thinking of my train of thought, where I was going with that. Let me pass you.
Okay.
We can come
Yeah.
back.
So we started ceramics 30 years ago in college, and then got back into it during the pandemic, which I think for all of us was really difficult, particularly here in New York City. And so, it started as a kind of hobby, but it really ended up, in some ways, saving our mental health. And I took a sabbatical from the seminary after serving as 2 years as the president and helping it negotiate a merger with another school, and it was really, really stressful. And I was kind of just a shell of a person. And so I spent 6 months in our studio, and many hours a day, just hunched over the wheel and being very, very present in the moment of the thing. And I found the practice of finding my body again. It was really, really helpful to me in helping to address, that kind of the impact of prolonged stress, And so I think in some ways, it certainly teaches us about our relationship with God, but I think in some ways it kind of taught us also about our relationship with each other and our relationship with ourselves. And yeah.
Yeah, for me, definitely, it's a place of peace, and people talk about the monkey brain, and I'm kind of ADHD, mind everywhere, thinking of all these things, and it really helps me to focus and quiet myself, and is like really restorative. Time in the studio, time flies, and yeah, it just brings me a lot of peace and joy.
Well, I'm really taken with this idea of like the beauty of imperfection. And I remember you guys were saying like there are times where you're like trying to make like a vessel, like sort of like a set of vessels and exactly the same, and it's never quite the same each time. But can you just say a little bit more about like, I don't know, just like how you see or how you, I don't know, like when those imperfections come, like what that's like for you?
Yeah, I think I'm learning to embrace it, often by pressure. When my sister-in-law asked for some soup bowls, and I'm trying to make them exactly the same, and I thought, no, I mean, it's great when they're not quite the same, because you know that they're homemade and they kind of fit in each other a little bit different, or they're good for different uses. So I'm learning to be kind of more open and flexible, and it's not that we're making something that you can buy in a store. It's individual, unique, and each piece has kind of a purpose, and it doesn't have to be exactly perfect for that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got like a dozen of these little cups around the house, and none of them look the same, and they can't really stack in each other, and so I kind of embrace the imperfection. That's also why I'm not a very good potter. But I think the thing that I really love the most about this is I like having a creative outlet that can create something that's usable. And one of my favorite poems is by the poet Marge Percy, and it's called "To Be of Use." And the poem reads, "The people I love the best jump into work head first, without dallying in the shallows, and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo and with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields, harvest, and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals or field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust, but the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine and oil, Hopi vases that hold corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for the water to carry, and a person for work that is real.
That's good. I love that. I love just like the messiness of all of this. And it strikes me how, I mean, like whether in our personal or professional lives, and like sadly oftentimes in the church, so much of it has been about like perfection and rigidity, and like, are you good enough? Or are you measuring up to some sort of unattainable ideal? And it's like, for me, like I turned 52 this year, and I was like, surely by the time I turn 52, I will have like let all of that go and just like be able to embrace like imperfections as grace and as a gift even. And I love how this like not only gives permission, but it's kind of like, this is actually how it's supposed to be. And there's like a goodness and a beauty in that. Even when you look at like the created world, it's not this like highly curated, it's human beings who put that rigidity and that sort of like curation there, but it's like there's like a wildness to it. And I don't know, why is that so hard for us to embrace?
Yeah, I think for me, just, practicing, playing, it's just been really, useful to fail at things, because I'm
Yes.
not real comfortable with failing. And so
Yeah.
it's, it's great to be able to do something that's very forgiving, can be recycled. You haven't ruined anything. It's, it's still there, and it can be formed again into something else. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep thinking to myself, both in the studio and at work, that the perfect is the enemy of the good, and that's something. I think that perfection is a burden that keeps us from trying and experimenting. And once you fail enough times, you realize that failure is not the worst thing.
Yeah. Well, do you have any final encouragements for us, or words of tips or words of counsel as we continue in our own practice of beauty in different ways?
So I've done a lot of my academic stuff is in the area of arts and theology and culture and imagination, and so that's been something I've been thinking a lot about. But most of that work, that discipline, really focuses on kind of fine art or studio or gallery quality art. And I found something really beautiful and transformative about just having a go at it and not feeling like I need to be the best at something, but that I can just do something and enjoy it. And I think finding a creative outlet where we can play and experiment and find beauty in mess is a really great discipline. And I kind of think that might be sort of where God's at in our lives, not in trying to make something that's perfect, but just something that is beautiful and useful to us. Because I don't think we're perfect, but I really hope that we're beautiful and useful to God.
Yeah.
I ditto that.
Well, we're also going to be using a chalice. Episcopalians call the chalice and paten, like the plate that the bread is on. We're going to be using vessels that the DeLashmutt made today for the Eucharist. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. Let's give them a round of applause. Yeah. Oh, but don't go anywhere just yet. Don't go anywhere just yet. You can check out some of the things that they've made up here. But I'm actually going to invite all of us to stand as we close in prayer. Actually, Michael, you can come over here too.